Hi, my name is Delilah Rand. My pronouns are she, her. And my zine is on bans on transgender healthcare and women's reproductive healthcare are eroding the American concept of bodily autonomy, an argument. And this topic is very near and dear to my heart, both as a transgender woman and as someone who considers myself a huge women's rights advocate as well as trans rights advocate. Um, this was a great intersectionality to cover for the zine in this class because it's something that personally affects me, it affects people that I care about, and it's something that I'm passionate about because the career that I want to do is I want to be a therapist, and as I said in the video I posted at the beginning of this semester, I want to work predominantly with women and transgender people. And so this is something that's really near and dear to me. And so over the last several years, there have been countless attacks in both courts and in kind of like society, our perception of each other over access to healthcare. This covers both reproductive access to healthcare as well as gender affirming access to healthcare. And I would argue in the scope of this that this comes down to civil rights. And civil rights is an umbrella term that encompasses what we would see as inalienable rights. So that would be freedom to vote, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, religion, expression, pursuit of happiness, etc. This can all be simplified into the phrase of bodily autonomy, or as it's defined. The definition is the right to decide what is proper and good for your body without fear of violence or coercion. And so that's actually the first thing that you see on the first page. This is a sticker that was produced by the Positive Women's Network. They're an advocacy group for women's rights and just bodily autonomy. And so I took the sticker that they used and decided that that would be a great kind of focal point. And it just reiterates what I just said, that bans and restrictions on women's reproductive health care and transgender health care are inextricably linked to bodily autonomy, and banning those rights, those accesses, are diminishing our value of bodily autonomy in our culture. So to give some further background, there's a lot of misunderstanding on who's perpetrating these bans. A lot of people misunderstand and think that it's the voters in that area, the constituents, but it's actually not. Bans on women's and transgender healthcare is actually perpetrated by an unofficial network of individuals who are politically conservative, religiously motivated, with beliefs rooted in medical misinformation and personal prejudice. So this is the meat of it, the important part, but it goes with the fact that this is about the fight for bodily autonomy. And so the important thing to know about this is this first statistic, which I know can be very hard to see. If you can't see it, what you can do is you can Google this question and put human rights campaign. Actually, no, sorry, Pew Research Institute is where this statistic came from, and you'll be able to find this exact chart because this is published also with some context and article on their website. And what this shows is it shows that the majority of independent and liberal voters, or Democrats rather, the blue, are in favor of protecting access to gender-affirming healthcare and reproductive healthcare. That's 76% of Democrats, 56% of independents, and 32% of Republicans. And that's important to note because going back to what I said about who's perpetrating this, it's that unofficial network. So the network is a religiously motivated, unofficial organization of state legislators, anti-LGBTQ activists, detransitioners, trans-exclusionary radical feminists, or TERFs as they're more commonly called, and physicians who all collectively dub themselves the network and work together to push a conservative agenda. And so the reason this is important is because back in 2013, a study was done. They analyzed more than 300 bills across 33 states that were looking to ban gender-affirming care. And what the AI found is that all 300 bills shared similar structure and wording, actually almost identical structure and almost verbatim wording, showing that all the documents came from a parent document that was identical. So that means that all of these documents are being perpetrated by the same people. Another kind of poignant fact of this is that In 2023, there was also a former collaborator of the network who released more than 2,000 emails spanning from 2019 to 2023, and it really showed the effort of this unofficial organization of people in trying to ban gender-affirming healthcare, and also trying to chisel away at access to reproductive healthcare. And where this really starts to become important is with this map here. These dark red states are where abortion and any sort of abortion-related healthcare is banned. These orange states are where there are severe restrictions, and the blue states are where abortion access has been protected. So where this starts to really become poignant is that post-Dobbs decision, an unintended secondary effect that is going to impact the rights of those that can carry children. And mind you, I don't say women in particular because it's not just women who can be gestational parents. It's important to understand that we're now infringing on their right if they want to terminate that pregnancy for whatever reason, or if it's an inviable pregnancy, if it's life-threatening to the gestational parent. And so what that means is it's going to limit the ability not only for the person carrying the baby to choose not to carry the baby, to not be a gestational parent, but it's also going to impact their ability to sue for negligence in the event that a reproductive related medical procedure failed. And an example of this would be a vasectomy or tubal ligation. Those are preventative measures. If you get it done and still have a baby, that's now negligence on the doctor's part that performed the sterilizing procedure. So under these new precedences, wronged parents wouldn't be able to go in for a negligence suit. They wouldn't be able to file a tort claim saying, hey, this doctor did this wrong. And that also extends to if someone had a pregnancy terminated, whether it was life-threatening, whatever the reason for the pregnancy, if they had an abortion and then it turns out later that a part of the embryo was still left behind that became somewhat viable and caused further distress to the parent to have to either go back in for another procedure or to have complications due to the remnant that was left behind, that would also be negligence. And by overturning protection to abortion access, we've now threatened the ability of parents to seek justice for these wrongs. And so what this is really doing is it's diminishing the impact of bodily autonomy, because not only are we saying that, no, you can't have an abortion, you can't have access to these things, but now if a doctor makes a mistake that results into pregnancy, these parents are now forced to carry the pregnancy that was unwanted, unexpected, whatever, and that also infringes upon their rights. And what it all really comes down to is it comes down to sex discrimination. More specifically, it comes down to misogyny. And this is significant because a lot of discrimination, especially going back to the transgender side of this intersectionality, a lot of the arguments used to dismiss trans identities is sex stereotyping. And that's especially the stereotyping that transgender minors or transgender young people are merely confused and that they don't really know what they want from life and who they are. And it's kind of used to invalidate their identity and steer them towards normative sex roles, particular sex roles. And so that in itself functions as a way of undermining your bodily autonomy as well as discriminating as sex discrimination. This also creates a kind of master status, because being a woman is already a master status, and that also now makes being transgender a master status as well. And what it's doing is it's creating additional stratification. It's undermining and invalidating the identity of these trans minors. And by sex stereotyping, you're contributing to the casual sex discrimination that's often translated into legal discrimination. So that would be laws saying who can participate in women's sports, laws saying which bathrooms or locker rooms you can use. These are discriminatory, and it comes down to just good old-fashioned sex discrimination and misogyny. And it also goes off the precedence of cases such as Bostock. The precedence of Bostock was built around the idea that transgender minors are merely confused or misled, once again, invalidating their identities and trying to steer them towards more normative roles, which is discriminatory. Um, it also takes away from the rights of the parents a lot of the common arguments used in proponents who are against gender affirming healthcare for minors usually talk about the parents' rights, the parents' rights. Well, in these instances, where like Bostock, where you're kind of railroading the transgender minors, you're also stepping on the parents' rights. Because what if the parent believes their kid? They believe, yes, my kid is transgender. They should be able to express themselves authentically. Now you're infringing upon that parent's right to validate their child. So it's just it comes down to just discrimination, but very specifically sex discrimination. It's misogyny, um, and that brings it down to this. This chart here is actually distributed by Industry All. They're a union advocacy group that tries to advocate for better inclusion of civil rights. And they created a hierarchy, a pyramid of sex discrimination. And if you notice right here, not even at the very bottom, but partway up, is that conditioning, that guiding towards normative roles. And so I thought it was very important to bring this chart in, but also this one, because now we're going to talk about the science of it, which is breaking the binary. A lot of those precedences that sex discrimination is built on this presumption that there is a dichotomy in human biology, but there's not. Sex in human biology is a spectrum. And if you read even the most cursory studies on intersex genetics, you'll understand that we are not male and female. We're a spectrum of human sexual presentation. And that's not even talking about the gender side of how we perceive sex. That's just talking about the primary sex characteristic presentation that your body develops, in addition to the secondary characteristics that it develops. And so in this way, it really highlights that there really is no binary. It's really just a spectrum of how we interact with our bodies and how our bodies interact with society. So this is the intersectionality of biological sex and gender. But what it shows us is that, to an extent, how we perceive sex is socially constructed, because our society claims that there is a dimorphic dichotomy, that there's male and there's female. But that's not true. That's a social construction. There is a spectrum. And same thing with gender expression. We understand that because it is socially constructed mannerisms and presentation choices, like, we can claim that much of what we consider to be male or female is really actually more wrapped up in the gender side than in the science side. And therefore, I would argue that that makes sex just as socially constructed as gender, because when people talk about sex, they're generally not talking about the good, proper science behind it. They're talking about prejudices and their preconceptions. And so what that really kind of wraps it down to is that this last page that I have, which is that despite the collective presumption that sex is binary, it's not. And actually, there was a noteworthy 2006 study done where one researcher posited, quote, any close study of sex anatomy results in a loss of faith that there's a simple natural sex distinction that will not break down in the face of certain anatomical, behavioral, or philosophical challenges, end quote. And that's important, because that was not merely a doctor making an opinion, but that was a medical study being done almost 20 years ago, 19 years ago. And so it really shows that this isn't a new concept either. Doctors aren't kind of just stumbling upon this, oops, like, we've been wrong. They've known for a while that they've been wrong. It's a social battle that's been kind of keeping that information from being disseminated. And the reason this all matters is because it all comes back down to, it infringes upon our bodily autonomy. It infringes upon our right to decide what is good and right for us without the threat of violence or coercion. So that means that I should be able to decide what to do with my body without somebody threatening me with violence or some sort of ramification for my behavior. And so to wrap this up, I want to show you this map. The dark magenta is where gender affirming care for minors has been banned. The orangey red is where there are severe restrictions. The gray, there's no data. And the purple shows that there are laws protecting transgender youth. And so this is why it's important, because what it comes down to is the more laws that crack down on women's bodily autonomy and on reproductive bodily autonomy, the more laws that we pass restricting transgender people, the more we're going to see maps like this expand with that magenta, showing more and more restrictions, more and more bans. And what we've just walked through illustrates that a lot of the arguments being used are based in either bad science or just blatant prejudice. And so the evidence and the statistics are kind of terrifying, and it shows that bans and restrictions on both women's reproductive health care and transgender health care are damaging our social conceptual beliefs in bodily autonomy. And if we don't fix that, if we don't change our trajectory, if we don't fight harder, if we don't acknowledge our privilege and fight for those who don't share what privileges we do have, and if we don't make others aware of what privilege they enjoy, then we're just going to keep seeing a continued polarization. And so I thought this was something important to discuss the intersectionality of how bans on healthcare are going to have they're already having the real secondary ramifications of diminishing our belief in bodily autonomy. Anyway, I understand this was a long video. I don't know how long other people's videos were going. I kind of made this before watching it, before watching others. And so thank you for bearing with me. I hope this starts productive conversations for people. And if you want to read a longer version of my thesis essay, I actually did write a more in-depth paper that I submitted to the Jefferson Review, which is our school's academic journal. So you can look for the free PDF versions of that on our Learning Commons website. Anyway, thank you. It's been really fun this semester, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your academic careers.